I'm talking to Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Let's continue on immigration. We touched it earlier, but this is such an important topic.
Yes.
What's the status of the DREAM Act in Congress? It's still being blocked by Republicans?
That's correct. It's we will, in all likelihood, not pick it up in the 112th session, and it's really a shame and a travesty. You know, in the 111th Congress, we came very close to passing the DREAM Act. It was passed out of the House of Representatives, and but for 2 votes in the Senate, we would have had it passed. So my hope is that we regain the majority in the House of Representatives, that they hold the majority in the Senate. I think that there are many senators who regret the fact that we had not passed the DREAM Act, and we will certainly move with all deliberate speed, not only to pass the DREAM Act, but to reintroduce the comprehensive immigration reform law as well. Our system is broken. It's been broken for some time, and it's become a meat grinder at this stage, in that so many families are being fractured because we have a 20th century immigration system that didn't even work then, that is still in an operation now in the 21st century.
You touched on comprehensive immigration reform. We're interactive here, so I have 2 questions on Facebook I'll ask you quickly. One, someone is asking whether the Democratic Party shouldn't, I'm going to praise the question, shouldn't bear some of the responsibility because some Democratic senators also blocked immigration reform.
Well, I wouldn't say the party. I would say those senators. Because were it not for the Democrats in the House of Representatives, we wouldn't even gotten it that far. One of the things that is going to be very important for people to realize is that clearly democracy in the United States is not a spectator sport. And when you're not involved, you miss an opportunity to help us take the ball over the goal line. So for that person who would say that the Democrats aren't making it happen, well, if you happen to be a Democrat, we hope that you'll join us in our crusade to make it happen.
Another question. Ask Congresswoman Clarke what she thinks is her major achievements in the Congress.
Wow. There's so many of them. There's the Fast Redress Act that was passed in the House of Representatives, is now part of the rulemaking of the Department of Homeland Security. And that came about because I had some constituents that came to me, and they were constantly being detained by Customs and Border Patrol as they would travel in and out of the United States because they were on the no-fly list, or there were names of individuals similar to theirs on the no-fly list. And what I have said, and my colleagues have concurred, is that people need the opportunity to expedite getting their names off that list. Families, particularly in a place like New York, need to be able to travel to and fro, and to have the indignity of being detained time and time again when you are not the individual that they're seeking to prohibit from flying is not the way to do business. It certainly is not a way for us to continue to build our nation and its commerce. So that was one of the laws that we passed. The other law that I passed with my colleagues is the immigration backlog bill. And what that bill did is it's for a particular cohort of folks who are trying to actually gain citizenship. Everyone at this stage who's trying to gain citizenship must go through an FBI background check, as we've talked about. What we found was that the FBI was sitting on a whole host of these background checks simply because, you know, it wasn't like high stakes activities for them. And we said, you know, we're going to penalize the FBI if these backlogs in citizenship are not reduced within 90 days. And as a result of that, again, we've seen a change in their behavior, particularly for citizenship applications, where they're going through much more quickly. I would say those are 2 of my my proudest moments, because I know that they go directly to the heart of the people that I represent. But one of the things that I guess tangibly, if someone were to come through the 11th Congressional District and wanted to see, because everyone likes to talk about bringing home the bacon, you may pass by the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens on Washington Avenue and see that there's a whole new visitor center that has been created. We will be cutting the ribbon on that very shortly, and I brought in substantial financial federal dollars when we were allowed to do so for the building of that visitor center, which we hope will bring many dollars into the 11th Congressional District and stimulate the economy. And then finally, we were able to work with SUNY Downstate and Stony Brook to bring to Central Brooklyn a 9/11 health center that will basically monitor the health of individuals who are from Brooklyn, maybe even Staten Island, that rushed in to help during the 9/11 events and whose health have been adversely impacted as a result of that, or adversely affected as a result of that. We have a lot of respiratory disease, a lot of cancer as a result of so many who took the time to rush in. And that are, I could say, 4 of my accomplishments thus far.
Good. I hope the viewers satisfied. Another one finally on immigration. Secretary Janet Napolitano, the Secretary of Homeland Security, recently announced that they're reviewing a proposal to change the rules with regard to petitions that can be filed by U.S. citizen parents for undocumented children. If you're undocumented, as you know, in the United States, there are only 2 ways basically you could get your green card. That is if you're petitioned for by a spouse or a U.S. citizen child who's above age 21. But if you are a parent, you cannot remain in the United States and file for a child who is above 16, and in the United States undocumented. And the new proposal allows them to grant a waiver that would advance parole that person back into the country. So they'll have to go back to the country of origin to pick up their visa, but they'll get an advance waiver. Many of us are wondering, what sense does that make? Why not grant the waiver so they could just pick it up right here?
Listen, that does make a lot of sense. But we know the climate that Janet Napolitano is working in. And one of the initial proposals in comprehensive immigration reform was this touchback provision, if you remember correctly.
Right.
This is just a form of touchback. And I've spoken out against it. I think it doesn't make any sense. And we know how our embassies are working overseas, particularly in Caribbean countries. It's very difficult.
Because the discretion is whether the immigration officer want to give you the visa or not.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that we're being disingenuous if we believe that because we're granting this waiver, that behavior would cease. I would certainly be talking with Secretary Napolitano about that and let her know what the practical application of what she's talking about, what that really means.
I think our community will be happy. Let us look a little bit on, before we close, on foreign policy. The United States, the Caribbean is basically the U.S.'s third border, safest border. The United States government is sending billions of dollars to Pakistan, other countries that shall remain unnamed, that they think is in their best and vital security interests. But we neglect these small countries that don't really have the kind of security infrastructure to help protect the United States. Because if terrorists are forced out of Asia and the Middle East, they'll come to more vulnerable parts of the world. The Caribbean, basically, they can barely stop drugs from coming on the planes, much less sophisticated terrorists trying to bring weapons to the United States. Don't you think it's time that, 1, the United States establishes a free trade agreement with the Caribbean, 2, a more robust security cooperation and foreign aid so that we could help these very small countries devastated by the economic downturn, so that they could in turn help the United States secure itself?
I agree. Let me say this. There are a couple of things at work here. One, the economies of each individual nation barely make a blip where the United States is concerned. They're looking for the big nations, Central and South America. So one of the important parts of all of this is really CARICOM coming together and putting all of its weight to bear in one common market, which is something that they have been trying to establish for quite some time. What happens is that each nation goes in and negotiates against the other.
Exactly.
And so it makes it very difficult for the United States to say, okay, we're going to have a policy that is across the board for all nations, even if it is a security arrangement. Because oftentimes, we do have some of those, as a matter of fact. There's an initiative called the Meridian Initiative, which provides training and soft monies to help them harden their security infrastructures in the region. But that's not creating jobs in any significant way, which is what we really want to see a security arrangement do, whether it's cybersecurity or some other security arrangements. I think the first thing that has to happen, quite frankly, is that these nations really take the CARICOM existence very seriously. And then we have to look at each nation's economy and what is driving them right now. You have such an imbalance in the various nations, debt load, products. All of those things have to really be examined so that we can come to a real agreement about what a trade agreement for the region would look like and how we can best get that done.
With regard to foreign aid, I think the United States government probably spends $86 million or something like that on foreign aid to the Caribbean. Last week on our radio program, we were talking to Charlie Rangel, Congressman Charlie Rangel, and we asked him why in 2012 the United States is spending only $86 or less billion on foreign aid to the Caribbean when we're in the hemisphere, we're neighbors, and we're supposed to be in the U.S. vital interest. And he said that he's wondering why there's not a strong Caribbean lobby in the United States. And to some extent, he says that our community should blame itself for the lack of resources via foreign aid to the Caribbean. What's your view on that?
I don't think that you necessarily have to blame yourself. I think you have to take on some of the responsibility. I think we all have to take on some of the responsibility. Oftentimes, foreign aid is an outgrowth of maturity in terms of political power exerted upon the powers that be, so that folks from other nations make their preferences clear to the U.S. government, and that translates into political action and a whole host of other things. That's where coming of age as a Caribbean community, maturing politically, and understanding what a Caribbean lobby is truly about, it comes about. That's where the rubber meets the road. And, no power is given to anyone without a demand. And so what we're asking is that out of the goodness of their hearts, Congress people from Idaho should essentially see the Caribbean region as an important foreign aid place. I don't know the last time they've seen a Caribbean person, one. But beyond that, when they think of the Caribbean, they think of it as a resort area. And so they're not even thinking about the people who live there as a place of need. So it is up to us to make it plain. And I think the Congressional Black Caucus has done a tremendous job under the circumstances, because we stand in that gap where no one else would be there.